Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you this week. Um, Great week that I had this week. Really great news last Friday. For those of you who have been listening to the show for a while, know that I've been fighting melanoma since going back to August. And I had a fourth surgery now, let's see, 3 weeks ago. Um, 2 weeks ago now, maybe. I'm losing track of time. That's lovely. At any rate, um, I'd had another surgery to remove what was hopefully the last of the cancer. That was my fourth surgery. It was relatively minor, but nevertheless, um, I went back for a follow up with my physician last week, and results seem to indicate that all the cancer has been removed. So um, really excited, thrilled, relieved. Um, of course, I'd already had a lymph node biopsy that indicated that it hadn't spread. So at this moment, um, no one ever, and anyone who's ever had cancer never really wants to utter the words that they're cancer free. But that's as close as I think I can be as of right now. So, needless to say, I'm thrilled. And once again, I've received a lot of support via the show from the listeners. And I just want to thank everybody once again for all their thoughts and thank you for being part of this journey with me. This has been a platform for me to be able to discuss this a little bit, and it's been great to have. And it's been great getting some of the feedback that I have, not only about the show, but the support from the listeners. And I really appreciate it. And I wanted to make sure that I shared this with everybody because obviously it's great news. And I go today for one last follow up and I guess to start deciding if I'm going to do any other kinds of treatment, if I'm going to do any kind of other preventive therapies. That really hasn't been discussed at this point. So, not quite completely finished with this, but it appears in the moment that at least we have gotten it all. So, just want to thank everybody again for all their encouraging thoughts and their support over the last few months here on this show here on Spreaker, and those of you who listened before on the old network. Once again, just thank you everybody for all of your support and your kind thoughts. And needless to say, I'm thrilled and I feel a certain amount of reinvigoration. So it's a great feeling. So I'm going to enjoy this as long as I can. A couple other announcements that I wanted to make here. I know that I had originally, I believe at the end of last week's show, I discussed the possibility of talking about the Oak Island mystery, and I'm still going to do that. I decided against doing it today. Um, the main reason in not discussing that today is because of the docu series that the History Channel is running on the Oak Island mystery. Now, I normally don't like to depend my show based on what other people are doing, but in this case, it is their season finale, and I'm curious to see what they dig up. They claim to have found something, so excuse me. So I'm looking to see before we go on the air and just and speculate. I really would rather know exactly what it is that they claim to have found, and then be able to discuss it in entirety next week. Um, so that's my plan at this point. Then is to discuss the Oak Island mystery next week. Um, Many of you may already have some familiarity with it, but for those who don't, I'll go into greater detail. The History Channel's been running a little docu series. I think they've had about 5 episodes. These brothers who own the controlling interest in the shaft in the area where they think there may be some sort of buried treasure or relics, and there's a lot of mystery involved in it. And the reason why I would cover it is because of that. So, going to discuss that then next week, and I'm going to wait the findings of whatever they're willing to release to the public that they found, and go from there in terms of the discussion. So I apologize for shifting gears, but I feel like it's best to wait for that in going into next week when I've got a more complete story. Um, for those of you who haven't, check out the show's Twitter, Facebook pages. Um, I'd like to try to update things there as much as possible. So please check those out. Google Plus as well. I'm constantly doing little tweaks here and there to the website. I haven't done much with it this last week. I've been kind of preoccupied. So bear with me on that. Nevertheless, I have some plans for that down the road, and it's a step-by-step process. And that being said, I've had the biggest week for the show thus far. I don't know if it's just because everybody loves black-eyed kid stories or what, but not only that, but just as the show in general, counting all the shows in the catalog at this point, it was a record-setting week for me. And I keep saying this every week, and it's amazing to me. The show really does seem to be catching fire. So, those of you who are new listeners, welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy what I'm doing here. I have every intention of trying to put forth a quality product that people enjoy. Bear with me because it's certainly a learning process for me. Um, Nevertheless, I'm going to continue to try putting forth something that not only that new listeners can enjoy, but for those of you who are returning listeners, thank you for being there and being there through the inception and through all of this. I think I'm improving the show as I go, um, but nevertheless, there are reminders that some things are out of my control and some things I seriously need to improve upon. So I'm going to continue to do my best to put forth a quality product. And in the meantime, thank all of you for standing by the show, coming to support the show. It's been great. This has been a lot of fun for me, and really the reason I keep doing it is because people listen. That's been the point. Is I really wanted to create a platform for people who from all walks of life to feel like they can discuss these kinds of topics and not feel any kind of shame about it. There's a lot of ridicule in a lot of these subjects, and I don't think it's entirely fair. It's important that we create an open engagement in the unknown, in the unexplained. Whether or not things are paranormal or whether or not every single thing I talk about is true, there's some sort of phenomenon going on behind it, and the whole key in this is trying to get a little closer to the answer. And by discussing these things and creating an environment where people can feel free to listen and hear these viewpoints, I think it's essential. I think it's essential for scientists. I think it's essential that we find some answers to things that there can be answers found. Uh, that being said, there are some things I don't know that we'll ever be able to find definitive answers for. However, I don't think that should stop us from trying. So I want to make sure that the whole point in this was creating something that everybody from all walks of life could listen to. And that's my goal, and that's going to continue to be my goal with the show going forward. I open a lot of it. I'm open to opposing viewpoints, and I'm not going to strike somebody's ideas down if they're different than my own. That's great. We need to have discussion. We need to have constructive discussion. That being said, there's no point in trashing other people's ideas, and that's not what I want to do with the show, and that's not what I do. I try to present topics and ideas that, even though I may not always agree with everything, at least to open discussion about it. So that being said, I'm going to move into today's topic, the Blue Planet Project. Now, for those of you who've listened to the show several months ago on the other network, you'll know that I did a version of this show there. And yeah, I know I've done this with a few topics, but I feel like with the growing audience that I have with the new network, that it's important that I kind of bring some of these back because I find myself talking about topics in relation to things that I've talked about before. So I feel like I need to kind of go back and revisit some of these old topics as a way of basically informing the audience, the new audience, to the ideas and things I've talked about before, and kind of give an idea where I stand on some of these things. So that being said, I decided I wanted to go back to the Blue Planet Project. Um, Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Blue Planet Project, I'll give you a little bit of a background on it here. It is a brief and unknown report, so to speak, that surfaced several years ago. It can be found on the internet. It can be downloaded for free. It's out there. Uh, and I would recommend that if you have any interest in the topic, that you take a further look at it because it's 100 plus pages. I'm not going to be able to discuss the thing in entirety in the show. So I highly recommend that after listening to this, you're interested, download it, take the time to read through it yourself, and you be the judge on what you think it is. Um, it was allegedly written by a scientist who was contracted by the federal government to investigate a crash site of an alien spacecraft and to allegedly interrogate captured aliens. The report is said to be a collection that the scientist's writings for over 33 years of work. Um, there's not a whole lot known about the origins. There's not a whole lot known about the actual person who did this, who claimed to have done this. Uh, there's very little known. So that immediately opens it up to a lot of criticism, as well it should. Um, I'm going to leave it to the audience to decide whether or not they believe that there is truth in this, whether it's all true, partial truth, or an excellent work of science fiction, because that's where really the opinions range with this particular project. Now, in this report, the scientist claims that there's over 160 different types of aliens that have been encountered, known types of an alien life forms that have been encountered. The report makes a number of claims about, of course, extraterrestrials and the government, their collaboration. It goes into great detail about crop circles. It goes into great detail about alien technology. It goes into great detail about alien races, and I'll kind of touch on that a little bit more here in a bit. So there's just this. It's a vast, huge overview of what is believed to be government conspiracy behind hiding the truth about extraterrestrials. Um, the first real subject it kind of delves into is MJ12 or Majestic 12. For those of you who are conspiracy buffs and really into the extraterrestrial phenomenon, then you'll recognize that name. Um, Now, this MJ12, according to the Blue Planet Project, was established by President Truman and set up inside the National Security Council, and that this essentially created the invisible government. Um, they were only responsible to the president, and not only that, but this report makes claims that it runs most of the world's illegal drug trade, and that it ordered the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Um, you'll recall, and this has been said several times, the farewell speech of President Eisenhower, warning the citizens about the growing power of the military industrial complex. Many believe that Eisenhower was hinting towards this, and that President Kennedy was working to subvert and dismantle that complex. And of course, the MJ12 and the National Security Council being part of this, and that this report claims that he was killed by a Secret Service agent, um, and that ultimately that's who was responsible for his assassination. This war also argues that MJ12 is responsible for the creation of artificial diseases, particularly one it claims is AIDS, the HIV, as being a artificial disease, perhaps some sort of bioengineered disease. And then it also argues that this group is responsible for accidents and disappearances and murders of some people who have been secretly eliminated. That these are people who have had knowledge about what's actually going on, and that this agency has done what they can to um, subvert and to prevent this from getting out. Uh, this is by far, by many in the UFO community, in the extraterrestrial community, in this report, considers MJ12 as the main organization of extraterrestrial intelligence. That they know everything that humans could possibly know. They know it all, and that they're the ones that are carefully crafting disinformation campaigns. And this Blue Planet Project argues that Project Blue Book is one of those disinformation projects. So, with that being said, the report argues that there's a lot of collaboration and that there are a number of secret bases that have been established that UFOs and extraterrestrials and humans are working together, are collaborating. Now, one of those was rumored to be near Dulce, New Mexico. Now, for those of you who listen to my show on the other network, know that I was actually in New Mexico over the summer. I visited Roswell, and I went to the Dulce area. Very difficult to determine the road to go to supposedly where it is located in Dulce is a private road, so it's difficult to determine whether or not there is anything there. There have been a number of strange happenings around Dulce. There's been a number of cattle mutilations and things like that, as well as an intercepted report arguing that there was some sort of activity going on Dulce, and it's sort of become part of the phenomenon now that there's some sort of hidden base. Well, this report argues that in fact it's true, and that there's a cooperation between UFO or extraterrestrials and humans, and that they're doing joint experiments. Humans are doing a little bit of experimentation on aliens, trying to understand, learn from them. However, extraterrestrials are doing the same to humans, and that they're in the process, in some cases, some pretty creepy stuff. Now, they have several. The report goes on to give several different classifications of our extraterrestrial types. More malevolent, more neutral, more beneficial. Um, there's a number of races, and I think the races thing are fascinating. This report identifies three different types of gray aliens that are slightly different than each other. They come from different star systems. Type 1 is the Regalians that come from the Rigel star system. Type 2 come from the Zeta Reticuli system. And type 3 they're basically clones of the other two types. This particular report argues that the Regalians are the most deadly in respect to humans. They do not care about humans. That these are the kind that according to this, are the kind that Whitley Strieber encountered in detail in his book Communion. That these aliens need vital secretions for survival. That they bathe in human blood. That they absorb blood and other things from humans for their survival. And that is one of the things that's occurring at Dulce is that that the U.S. government is allowing these particular grays to have a certain percentage of humans to be able to survive as well as perform experiments. This report also goes on to discuss some other lesser known types of what it argues extraterrestrials, uh, what they refer to as hairy dwarves, intradimensionals, short humanoids that have a bluish skin. Of course, it discusses Men in Black as being a type of extraterrestrial. Um, what I found interesting was that it goes into discussion of the Nordic aliens. Now, I think I've mentioned the Nordic aliens before. They were often the most common type of described, and of course, the Nordic being that they are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, very tall. They are said to not intervene in human activities, and they will only intervene if the Greys were to affect us directly. There appears to be some sort of, according to this report, some sort of battle between the Greys and the Nordics over mankind. That the Greys are trying to protect us, or not, that the Nordics are trying to protect us from the Greys. Now, it sets up an interesting dichotomy because some people will describe these Nordics as looking very angelic. So there are many people who speculate that perhaps the idea of angels and demons comes from the idea of Nordics and Greys. Or in some other cases, another type of extraterrestrial, reptilian, which are described to live under the earth and dwell there and have reptile appearances, similar to, I guess, what you would describe as the old movie, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Right? For those of you who are really young and don't know, Google it. It's a worthwhile old movie. Nevertheless, that's the way it's described. It's sort of a reptilian type of humanoid. Um, so there are many people who see a lot of an interesting dichotomy there. Uh, Nevertheless, there's a number of these races that are detailed with tremendous detail. The report gives the average vital statistics for each race. Very, very incredibly detailed. That to me is the most interesting facet of this Blue Planet project. Now, um, as I had mentioned before, there's another interesting theory. Of course, I talked about the numbers of different things it talks about. Well, the report also makes an important note about time, that UFOs don't seem to be under the same constraints, the same time constraints that the humans are, that they have found some sort of way to manipulate time, which many would argue falls right into line with some other theories about the multiverse and things of that nature. Um, Nevertheless, it's technology that apparently, at least according to this report, that the U.S. government is working with these extraterrestrials to learn as much about as possible. Um, and as I said, the report goes into great detail about about all these different topics. So as I said, I really, I don't want to. I could spend another hour or two on that, and I really want to focus on some of the major topics that more or less get my attention. Now, the report discusses Regalian bases, which and I'm looking for it here for you real quick, so I want to make sure that I can discuss this a little bit. That there's that in this Regalian basis, it also talks about that this battle between the Nordics and the Greys, and that there's this at the moment there seems to be this truce, but nevertheless that it appears that the Nordics will respond violently if attacked or threatened. Uh, the ones at least that have some sort of speech capabilities. Apparently, there are some Nordics who have speech capability and some who do not. Some that just communicate telepathically, and that these Nordics don't seem to age, and they appear anywhere from 25 to 35, and that there is, as I said, at the moment they're in this peace with the Greys. But nevertheless, the Greys have apparently these Regalians have bases established here on Earth. Of course, the Dulce base being one of them. But this report offers a number of other different locations, um, including, let's see, in California, Mexico, Florida, Texas, Brazil, Uruguay, um, Argentina, Alaska, provides a number of different locations where there are bases that these regalians are established and are working with, not just, of course, the Dulce base, which is gone into great detail, but uh, it's a number of other bases throughout the world. Now, one of the interesting discussions, of course, about the technology, they talk about these implants that are used as a micro receptor. That these implants that are discussed about that people claim to have had put inside of them during alien abduction scenarios. It covers every single type of facet of the alien abduction UFO extraterrestrial phenomenon. It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing what it gets into. It gives a lot of detail on alien abduction, discussing typical sites of where implants are placed, typical types of experimentation that's done, of course, the sexual experimentations that are done, different things that people should look for on their bodies, triangular rashes or bruises, as well as unexplained slices or gashes in the skin, needle marks, um, just some. It kind of gives a sort of a be all know all of everything that you could look for in the alien abduction phenomenon. Now, one of the most interesting things for me as I was reading through this report was what the report discusses as the metagene factor. Now, this metagene, according to the Blue Planet Project, it is a biological variant that lies dormant in select members of the human race. That when there's this extraordinary physical or emotional like stress, that this gets activated, and it gets activated by this surge of adrenaline. This adrenaline actually kicks in another response, that it goes above and beyond just an adrenal response that we recognize that in times of stress and things of that nature, that it goes above and beyond, that people have in this extraordinary power that comes forth. And you often hear about people who, when they have an adrenaline rush, can do amazing things, lifting vehicles off of people, things like that. So it begins to make you wonder, perhaps there's the standard adrenaline response, but perhaps in some of these people who do these extraordinary feats, that perhaps they're locking into this metagene. Now, the interesting thing is that the main focus of the catalyst power is a gland in the middle of the brain called the pineal gland. Now, I've heard of this before, and for those of you who are familiar with this topic, it's been discussed several times. But it's believed that this is a place where psychic power, psychic energy comes from. That people who claim to have psychic abilities have tapped into this particular part of their brain, and that it's done so by an extreme load of adrenaline. Now, this report argues that the main interest of the aliens, particularly the Greys, is to understand and control the metagene for their own race. And they're doing this by doing experiments on both humans and other aliens, mind you. Now, it is also reported in this that extraterrestrials believe that men from the planet Earth are the deadliest creatures in the universe. And that's because that Earth people, or that because only the people on Earth are capable of generating this metagene factor, and then create this natural psychic power, or real power, as what it's described as in the report. Now, it goes on to say that, as many of the stereotypes go, that these extraterrestrials work on a logic, pure cold logic, a normal logical level. They don't bring emotion into their decision making. And because of that, there is a certain sense of order amongst these other extraterrestrial races, because they know what the other person knows. They're thinking the same way. They're really on the same wavelengths, and they're able to come to a greater peace with that. Now, they can't really predict mankind as well, at least according to this report. And so they're concerned about mankind's abilities. So they've been working to develop a hybrid, which is why this, for those of you who've heard about the hybridization and discussed it last week with the black-eyed children, that perhaps that's what these hybrid children are being brought and raised for and created by these extraterrestrials, is an attempt to understand this pineal gland, understand this ability, and try to harness it within themselves, or give themselves this ability. That they're working on creating hybrids, as well as hybrids from other humans, mixing a hybrid and a human to gain further control and access to this. It's an amazing thought, and it's an amazing report. How much of it is true, I don't know. It could very well be that this is just a truly fantastic work of science fiction, very detailed, very impressive. It very well could be that this is all this is. Nevertheless, there are some intriguing ideas, and for those who have been investigating the UFO phenomenon, investigating the government cover up behind it, this report leaves you more questions and leaves you beginning to wonder, what if there is something more here? I don't know that I believe every single word of this report, but nevertheless, it's intriguing. And there are certain things there does seem to be some indications to support, particularly a lot of the MJ-12 stuff and the cover up and the disinformation campaigns. There does seem to be some sort of phenomenon occurring, and I do believe that perhaps the government is involved. It is at least complicit to things that are going on. Nevertheless, hard evidence, solid evidence is lacking. But seeing reports like this leads one to wonder, what if this is true? What if this scientist was silenced by MJ-12? Unfortunately, we will probably never know. But it would seem that perhaps we do have a possibility of having some insight into what the government is doing and what might be out there in terms of extraterrestrial life forms. So, well, that's what I have for you this week. As I said, next week Oak Island mystery, and I think everybody will be intrigued by that. So make sure you tune in. Once again, thank you to everybody for your thoughts and your support. I appreciate it, and I will be back with you next Friday to discuss the Oak Island mystery. Until then, have a great one.